From the land to Grant University in Urbana-Champaign, Illinois, this is the Closing Market Report. It is the 10th day of October 2025. I'm Extension's Todd Gleason. Coming up, we'll talk about the commodity markets with Mike Zuzolo at globalcomresearch.com out of Atchison, Kansas. Mike also joined us for Commodity Week, which was recorded yesterday afternoon, along with Shane Holtorf of Logic Ag Marketing. He's from Alta, Iowa, and Colin Waters of the Illinois Corn Growers Association. Of course, overnight, the Chinese taking some action as it's related to trade. And President Trump, not happy about that, has responded. The marketplace tumbled today. We'll try to figure that all out as we make our way through this edition of the Closing Market Report from Illinois Public Media, as well as Commodity Week. And I'll remind you to visit our website at willag.org, where you can sign up for the December 12 Farm Assets Conference. It's not that far away, and there are a limited number of seats for this particular conference. You'll want to sign up earlier rather than later, but make sure you listen to today's program because we have a lot of ground to cover right here from Illinois Public Media.
Todd Gleason's services are made available to WILL by University of Illinois Extension.
December corn for the day settled at $4.13, 5.25 lower. The March down 5 at $4.29. November beans at 10.06 3/4, 15.5 lower. And the January at 10.23 1/4 finished 15.25 lower. Wheat futures were off 8 cents for the soft red and 6 3/4 for the hard red. Mike Zuzolo now joins us from globalcomresearch.com out of Atchison, Kansas. Oh, how things can change in an overnight from the time we recorded and talked yesterday for Commodity Week until the time we recorded today, at least in terms of what's happening in the global marketplace. China overnight saying that they will impose extra port fees on U.S. ships starting October the 14th. Of course, the United States will be on the same date imposing port fees on incoming ships. We had some discussions about that early in the spring, and those are not ships, generally speaking, that carry grains and oil seeds, but rather that are carrying goods for the most part. So I don't think that's something that will really impact soybeans directly as they're outgoing, or even the ships that would be carrying them that were coming in to begin with. But the marketplace certainly reacted. What did you make of it today when the news broke and the soybean market began to break?
Yeah, it's interesting, Todd, because when we did Commodity Week on Thursday afternoon, it felt like that the rhetoric between the two countries ahead of the end of the month meeting between the U.S. and Chinese presidents of both countries at the APEC meeting in South Korea was deteriorating, and frustration seemed to be building. That's kind of how I read the tea leaves as far as before the big news broke. Now, having said that, we did already know about China restricting even further the rare earth exports, and that has been a very touchy subject with President Trump, just as touchy as not purchasing any U.S. soybeans. And so that did make me feel very nervous about the ability of the beans to continue on higher. And that's kind of how I felt before Friday's news broke about President Trump not only saying, I don't even know if I need to meet with him, and that China's actions are, quote, hostile. Whenever you do that kind of a direct confrontational talk like he did with Asia, and I'm sure he does it on purpose, it tends to really put them in a corner and put kind of egg on their face, and they really don't like it. And so I do think the rhetoric got heated up enough at the end of the week. It made sense why we gave back the gains, after hitting a 7-week low. What was it, just a week ago or so after the grain stocks report, we were able to make new 3-week highs. This week got up to 10.30 in beans, and it just kind of washed all away by Friday's close. But we didn't lose the $10 handle. And as we talked about on Commodity Week, there are some basis moves that are happening right now that are worth watching. Spreads are worth watching. So I don't want to come into Friday's close with a doom and gloom attitude. I actually thought that it was very helpful that while the crude oil was the biggest loser along with wheat. It was really helpful that the dollar stayed weak. And I think that's something that we can sink our teeth into maybe when we come back from the weekend.
In past days, this kind of trade row, this kind of talk probably would have meant total and complete tumult, maybe even a lockdown limit day, particularly for soybeans. It's not even close to that. That seems like relatively good news out of a bad situation. Corn down somewhere between 4 and 5 cents, I suppose. Not awful, given that we're in the middle of harvest, and hedge pressure could have done that much damage in a single day, I would think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think here again, we saw the crude oil market make a new monthly low. The soft red wheat market was just about 3 cents from testing its near 4-year low, all the way back down at 493 and a half. And it could have been a lot rougher on row crops that were in the midst of harvest, especially given the speedy planting pace that Brazil has. One thing that I think is something we can't get around, and it's kind of undeniable at this point because of what happened Friday. I think I'll put a finer point on it because we did talk about this also on Commodity Week, is the idea that when you see news stories that Russia is going to pull back their wheat plantings for 2026, 5 to 6% in favor of oil seeds, when you see the United States bail out, and from sheer and true economic collapse, Argentina's economy with $20 billion of bonds essentially given to them at a cost, but essentially given to them. I think in agriculture, and producers are not shocked at this point when I talk to them about this is a long game that we're going to have to play here. This is not going to end in 2025. I don't think magically that we're going to have to carry all the way through into 2026. And like the mid 90s when we lost a lot of Asian business, like the mid 2010s, 2018, I was actually looking at some University of Illinois commentary from Todd Hubbs this afternoon, because I was looking at the bean chart and noticed how in June of 2018 it just collapsed. And I was looking at my stuff and stuff from the University of Illinois and going back and remembering what happened then. We're not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination, but you're right. We could have had a lot worse situation on Friday. Now time is of the essence to heal things up again. Now, as we've talked about a million times before, it seems we need wheat and corn to come in here and take the beans by the hand and say, you're done going down. You don't need to go lower than $10, especially ahead of the November first notice day at the end of this month. There's that big disparity between cash beans and futures, and we want the cash market to go up and the futures to stay where it's at, not the other way around.
Is there enough domestic demand for soybeans being developed as it's related to biofuels, renewable diesel, particularly in crush, and enough total demand for corn that maybe there might be some kind of floor that we can continue to manage to hold?
I actually think that's the shorter path to bringing demand back. Another way I think was shown this week when the bean oil market rallied seemingly pretty much by surprise was when Indonesia said they're going to go ahead with B50 biodiesel and get rid of, essentially phase out their imports of regular diesel, carbon diesel. That really could open up the soybean oil export market just in and of itself as a food commodity. But yes, I felt like we had a chance at seeing some good biofuel news coming out of our meeting with Canada. We didn't get that. The Keystone XL pipeline must have been, in my mind, one of the stumbling blocks. But I truly am at a point now after reading, 40 years worth of soybean demand and the path that Brazil is on and the infrastructure that China and Brazil have built together over the last 10 to 12 years. I really think that's the future if we're going to be able to insulate ourselves from shock prices to the downside because of trade.
Okay, thanks much. We'll hear more from you in Commodity Week. Do recall that was recorded yesterday afternoon. Mike Zuzolo is with GlobalCommResearch.com. He is out of Atchison, Kansas. Let's take a look at the weather forecast now. Eric Snodgrass is here from Nutrien Ag Solutions and Agrible. Hi, happy Friday to you. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again, Todd.
Let's start with the rains and the cool down that just happened across the Corn Belt. Tell me about that situation.
Well, a lot of us in central Illinois got leapfrogged by the system earlier in the week. So there's plenty of heavier rain in northern Illinois and parts of Iowa, Wisconsin. Then there was better rains in far southern Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, and pockets of Indiana and Ohio. But, you know, what could have been a great rainfall event to kind of just bat down all of the dust and the dirt, for my house was 1700ths of an inch. And so we were kind of hoping for a little bit more than just that. But there was a cold front that came through. We're feeling a bit more like fall right now, but that's not going to last too long. And unfortunately, for the next 7 days or so, we go back over drier and we start to see a warming trend return, which is going to continue to make this fall drought time period worse for us in the near term. So, yeah, it's nice to get the cooler weather in place, but we need to get some moisture in. I understand, Todd, that would definitely interrupt harvest. And I had a phone call this morning with Matt Bennett, who was literally sitting in his combine while we were chatting, and he's like, "When's it going to rain? Because I got just this much to finish up." And I said, "Well, you're going to be fine, Matt. You've got plenty of time." So that's the question: are we going to be battling rainfall as we get further into harvest this year?
And the answer is apparently no.
I think, yeah. Well, it's no for the next 7 days, but all right, there's something cool cooking over in Siberia. Now you're going, all right, why are we talking about Siberia? Okay. One of the big birthplaces of weather in the northern hemisphere is between Siberia, Mongolia, China, and the Himalayan mountains. The other big birthplace is around Indonesia, the big island archipelago there, in Southeast Asia. Now, why are those two places important? Well, we almost always have huge storms erupting over Indonesia. It's a tropical rainforest. I mean, it just pumps out heat and moisture into the upper atmosphere. And then you contrast that with how cold it can get in Siberia, which so far in the month of October has an excess of snowfall. So what does all that mean? We have really tightened up the poleward temperature gradient in that part of the world. And guess what? That is where our jet stream that goes across the Pacific, that's where it's born. And it's starting to gain momentum. It has lost momentum since last August, since this August, which is the last, 60 days, mainly because there was no good flow leaving that part of the world. Well, it's returning. And what we notice is that over the next 2 weeks, the speed of the jet stream across the Pacific picks up. And long story short, just like we saw in 2024, the flip from October to November could be pretty, the compare and contrast, it'll compare very well, but the contrasting from what we've seen so far will be huge. And I think what that means is we're going to start to see better chances for rainfall. So if you have opportunities to finish this harvest fast, do it, because I think the windows are going to start to tighten up when we approach the end of the month of October.
Interesting, because this all comes in the face of what I think has been an expanding drought in the lower 48.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. We have seen since August 1st, like I said, when the pattern lost all its momentum and the Bermuda high, drifted so far to the east. We've seen a 30% increase in drought area across the lower 48. And a lot of that's been here in the state of Illinois and surrounding states. And by the way, that drifting Bermuda high, I had a question earlier this week when I was giving a talk in Chicago, and this is, the predictions were for a really active hurricane season. What the heck happened? I'm like, well, it's been active. It's just not here. And I mean, we have Karen spinning out in the open ocean right now, Jerry spinning out in the open ocean, and they're not coming anywhere close to the U.S. coast because the Bermuda high is so far gone. Now, there is a nor'easter going up the East Coast this weekend, and I'm also wondering if that's maybe a bit of a telltale sign of maybe the way winter might shape up. So many of us are thinking that this winter could be one of those winters that, actually brings in good moisture and possibly relieves some drought conditions right now, because we can relieve drought in winter if you're south of I-80. Our freeze-thaw cycle is enough that you can get water into the soil. North of I-80, it doesn't happen too efficiently. So I don't know, Todd, it's shaping up to be a very interesting fall and winter once we get this momentum back in the pattern.
Well, we will be paying close attention to it with you. We'll be paying actually closer attention to South America all winter with you, trying to get updates on how the forecasts are going for the beginning of the growing season and throughout the season. So what's happening there today?
Well, they've been a bit drier for the last 10 to 15 days, but this was well forecast. And I'm anticipating when I get the numbers later on this afternoon on Friday from Mato Grosso that they're going to still be at the top end of their 5-year distribution on planting progress, because most of them are anticipating that the European model is right, which means near perfect rains are expected to return after another 4 or 5 days of drier weather. So if those rains come in, that's going to be perfect for germination, which means they're going to want to go hard to get the crop finished and planted before they arrive. And it's but we're back into a model battle time, so the GFS is no rain. The European says here's perfect rain, and everyone's asking me, well, which one do you trust? And I said, I'm just going to go off statistics, and that would be the European model tends to be the higher statistically performing model. When we look really long term, though, Todd, the thing to watch this upcoming summer for them will be to see if the typical La Nina precipitation pattern sets up. That would be drier in far southern Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Argentina. And if that's the case, the whole of South America total production could be cut back while Brazil makes headwinds and makes headway, and gets more acres in and better production. I think Argentina may be able to pull it back a bit if they do settle into drought, which is typical of La Nina.
Thank you much. We'll talk with you again next week.
Yeah, sounds good.
Eric Snodgrass is with Nutrient Ag Solutions and Agrible. Joined us on this Friday edition of the Closing Market Report that comes to you from Illinois Public Media. It's public radio for the farming world. For those of you who can stay with us for the whole of the hour on our home station, you'll hear our Commodity Week program. That's coming up next. Otherwise, you can find it online again at willag.org, willag.org, and many of these radio stations will carry it over the weekend, or look for it by name, Commodity Week, in your favorite podcast applications. Now, if you visit our website at willag.org, at the top of the page, you'll also find information and a way to register for the upcoming Farm Assets Conference. That's December the 12th at the Agri Center in Bloomington, Illinois. A new site for us this year, and we have a great lineup for you. We'll talk about fundamentals of the marketplace for both crops and livestock. We'll take a look at crop budgets, trade, transportation, and the global grain markets. Discuss any kinds of demand that might be on the horizon, particularly as it relates to biofuels and biomanufacturing. We'll also take a look at ag policies from an objective perspective, and we'll talk about some of the muddy boots kinds of things that you might consider as it relates to crop science coming up in the next growing season for weeds as well as agronomics, including how to make the most out of your nitrogen applications, whether they're made this fall or next spring. And we'll wrap it up by taking a look at how the leadership in the state around research and outreach work together to bring to you the best possible outcomes for the farm community. That's the Farm Assets Conference. You can register today on our website at willag.org. That's willag.org. It's December the 12th in Bloomington, Illinois. You've been listening to the Closing Market Report.